Ilka Pinheiro is the founder of the Intuitive Practice, or TIP. Through TIP, Ilka works as a channeler, energy medicine practitioner, and metaphysical trainer. She offers intuitive guidance, creative consultations, literary expertise, as well as intuitive animal communication. At the core of her work is dismantling internal and external systems of oppressions via writing, performance, and divination. Ilka was featured in the A24 documentary Look Into My Eyes, which recorded some of her sessions and personal input on psychic abilities. We're talking to Ilka today on Third Eyesight. My name is Juan Francisco, and I'm a psychic medium and tarot card reader. I've always been curious about the supernatural, the paranormal, and psychic abilities, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories with us. Let's get to it.
Okay, girl.
Ilka, yes, we are. We are recording in progress. And now folks won't hear that recording in progress by Zoom, but we heard it. So yes, we are. How are you, Ilka?
You know what? I'm over here. I'm present. I'm accounted for. I'm breathing. I'm walking. I'm talking. So yes.
That is as much as we can do today. And I'm so happy you're on the podcast. Just to let listeners know, I first saw Ilka before even speaking to her on the documentary Look Into My Eyes by A24. I went to a screening of it. She was on a panel afterwards, and I met her afterwards at like a little hangout with our mutual friend, Nikenya Hall, who's also been on the podcast. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. Yes, she's also in the movie, and we're going to get into the documentary a little bit. I really want to talk about you, your journey, your work. So first tell us where you're based. What do you do?
Okay, so right now I am based in New York. I'm a Brooklyn native, but I toggle back and forth between here and most recently Mexico City. And so when I go again, hopefully sooner rather than later, I will be probably returning to Playa del Carmen or Bocas del Toro, Panama. Don't know which one. So she's, Latin American and then USA.
I love it. Especially, we could use a getaway in these times. So
yeah. It's cool because I was doing, as the movie sort of like ramped up, I was doing a research project about, like indigenous spirituality over there. And so I was, I have this plan to kind of like pop through all the countries and like make my way eventually to Africa. And so we had to do a little pause for that for some family things, but we're going to get back to it because, the journey calls.
I love it. That sounds cool. And could you tell us what is the intuitive practice?
All right. What do I do? Yes. Okay. So my company name is the Ilka Pinheiro Incorporated because I didn't know what to call it. And I love a pun. So it's TIP for short. And then I was like, you know what? I actually offer all of these different services. So I came up with what I thought was a very cute thing. So the intuitive practice is the like leg of my company where I do, clairvoyant coaching and executive function coaching with like a little, like esoteric involvement. I also do, I do meditation mentorship. So like I teach people to kind of help find their most effective like method of meditation, because I think a lot of people feel like it's just like you have to sit in like lotus position and like om or just be silent. And just again another one of the ways in which like like these practices have been like limited.
Totally.
So it's about like helping people sort of like free themselves from that concept of like, oh, I don't know how to meditate or I don't like meditating. It's like, meditation for you could be dancing or washing dishes or whatever. So all of that lives under the intuitive practice. And then the Ilka Pens is my editorial services, my creative consultations. I'm a performer and a writer as well. I have my degree from Northwestern and then an MFA from Columbia. And I was like, well, you know what? I have all these snooty degrees and, I can support people with that. So that's the Ilka Pens. And then the Ilka Pets is, my work with animals because I do prefer them to people. And I always call myself animal. It's true. And I call myself animal famous. Ever since I was small, like animals would cross the street to like say hello. And it's just, they've always been like, oh my God, hey. And I'm like, what's up? So So I do animal behaviorism, and I kind of like help people figure out like why is Fluffers doing that. And animal Reiki. I'm a level 3 Reiki practitioner. Yep, girl. She been out here.
Animal Reiki, I love that. I love that.
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah, no. I mean, if you talk to cats, they'll tell you that they invented Reiki. It's a hot debate.
Not surprised.
But yeah, so yeah. So yeah, so that, and then I also do, like live in pet sitting. So people have just sort of been like, we're leaving for 10 days and our cat is doing this. And can you just come and like make sure they don't die and also get to the bottom of that problem? That's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Renaissance person. Hello.
She's out here. I figured actually all of this started. I don't know. I can't remember if this is a question, but I was always, kind of a weirdo in this way, but I decided to really focus it all after the 2016 election when I saw everyone freaking out, and I was like, okay, y'all, like we have more power than we think we do. And so now here we are in a really interesting spiral dynamic, right? Here again. So yep. Yeah, so yeah, a renaissance in many ways and on multiple levels.
Well, something that I've said on the podcast before, and now many people talk about this, not just me, that in times of crisis or cultural hardship, like the Civil War, COVID, maybe it's an election, I think people ask themselves really big questions and they return. There seems to be like a resurgence of spiritualism or an interest in something beyond us. Do you find that to be true? Like I've noticed, especially after COVID, and I'm one of those people, it's like we found our abilities or discovered our abilities, rediscovered every way you want to see it. Yeah, what do you think about that?
That's interesting. So that was not my personal experience, but only because I was pretty deep in it. But what I will say is that it's sort of, yeah, like the simplest explanation to that seems like, it's trauma, right? It's trauma. And, we're looking for ways to deal with trauma. And the reason I feel like that tracks is because that's how I sort of came to, doing this, right? I had a deeply traumatic early childhood. And I think that because my early childhood was as difficult, well, but because that was as difficult as it was, I think I kind of held on to my connections to that river of information that I always talk about, because I think we all, come out of it, right? And have our connections to it. And then as we kind of grow older, life, makes that wall a little thicker. And in some ways I was fortunate, right? Or like unfortunate enough that because of the things that I went through, I never really lost that connection. Right. So yes, I think that people who kind of had sort of maybe calmer, right? Like more tranquil sort of experiences moving into adulthood, then when all of these things happen, it's like, wait, am I safe? Right. And so we're looking for ways to ground ourselves, and make meaning.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. And I also think about there's so many stories of women or people who after they've given birth, their psychic abilities seem to uptick. I've heard that quite a few times, and that is a traumatic experience for many, giving birth, being pregnant. So yeah, how did and you can share as much as you want to, as much as you don't want to. How did your journey start? How did you discover your abilities, and what did that look like for you?
I always tell the story of Dwayne, my imaginary friend, who was actually a ghost, who came to hang out with me when I was about 18 months old, and a family member, burned me on the palm with a hot iron. And, he sort of came through and was like, not today. Right. And so he and I hung out for a really long time, probably till I was 11 or 12. And then he was like, okay, you got it, And so I'm convinced he was a spirit guide. And he was like, you know what, I'm going to go because puberty is coming and you meet other people. Right. So he kind of popped out. And so it's interesting for me because the journey was sort of always And so let's bloop to grad school. And, I'd kind of been in the closet, right? Right. Like the spiritual closet. And like every now and then close friends, I would like be like, blah, 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 and they were weird little things that happened in undergrad where like just a kind of uncanny moments, right? That other people would notice. Like, like weird moments of like psychokinesis where I would like, you know what I mean? Just odd things. And then when I was in my early 30s, I was in my early 30s when I was in grad school. And, I had that really good grad school insurance. And I was seeing, an alternative practitioner who was doing, meditation classes and things like that. And they were like, you want to come take one of my classes? And I was like, okay, sure. Right. And just it kind of blossomed from there. And even as I'm telling the story, I'm remembering like walking in, to see them for the first time. And I was like, listen, my cat might show up. She's been dead for like 5 years, but she might show up. So it was just, it's hard to answer that because it's always sort of been a part of it. So generally when people ask me, I'm like, yeah, I started really studying in like 2010 and like my business started in 2017, like that kind of story. But there's always been somebody around.
Is that something that the adults in your life, was there an adult in your life who was like, yeah, you're not crazy, this is real? Or was that something that you just very deeply felt like, no, I don't care what people say, this is real?
B, I come from a family who like, I'll just give you the example because let's not talk about them. So I was a really voracious reader, like very young. I started reading at like 10 months old. And I remember that my mom had, because I'm psychic, right? And so my mom had, all of these like Edgar Cayce books, and just things like that around the house. And so, and I would just be like, oh, what's this other thing that is a bunch of words, right? And I think it was like Edgar Cayce on reincarnation. Yep. And that was it. That was the first. And I was like, what's this here? Right. And that was probably like 10, so the adults in my life supported it indirectly.
Got it.
And so it was that. It was literature that was like, nah, girl, at least there's been a precedent.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, my family had some interesting books. I didn't quite know what they were talking about in these books, but they seemed like bigger concepts. So I can relate to that. I'm gonna pivot because I want to ask you something that you mentioned in the post-screening panel when I saw the documentary in Manhattan. You mentioned something that made my ears perk up that I'm very eager to talk about with you, and that's dismantling those internal, external systems of oppression. And I would love to hear from you. Let's pretend, because I know what this means, but I still want to ask you more about it for my own personal selfishness. I want to hear more about it. But let's pretend that a listener is like, what does that mean? How do I know that I am struggling with the internal and external systems of oppression? Because I know what that means, but I want to like bring a listener, welcome them into this conversation. What would you say to someone who has no idea what that phrase means?
Oh, wow. Okay. I would probably go real basic, and say something like, have you ever had like a big event coming up and you've had the thought, ooh, I got to hit the gym, or I want to be, whatever way, or I have to make sure I get facials, like that sort of thing, like before this event. So an argument could be made, right, that is an internalized conditioning of like beauty standards that maybe don't serve you, right? Things about, what is success and what point in like life progress do I need to be at a certain age? Like all of the ways that we kind of get on ourselves about not reaching whatever milestones. Marriage, hello, that's the one. Like, right, I am constantly talking to a certain demographic about, I'm not married yet, I don't know what, right? Like all of that, right? Just all of the things that we sort of, the stories that we tell ourselves, the behaviors in which we engage, the ways in which our like we navigate our interpersonal relationships that are, like the synthesis and, materialization of like all of these thought forms that aren't necessarily ours, but have been like inserted into us, like by our parents, by society, by pop culture, right? Like that. So, I think it's really easy for us to identify like external systems of repression. I think it's really easy to identify like, why isn't there student loan forgiveness? Like, why don't we have healthcare? Like what like scratching the surface of that, I think pretty quickly takes anybody who has, quite frankly, like, the common sense of a cabbage, like that, okay, there's something larger at work here that is maybe like limiting my ability, to like reach the places that I would like to reach. And there's something like internal that might be inhibiting my ability to even identify where it is I want to go. So I don't even know if that answered the question, but basically it's like, if you were ever doing something that like, there is that part of you that's like, do I want to be doing this? That is an internalized oppressive condition.
Yeah, or trying to meet an expectation that really doesn't, like your example of you called it a basic example. I think it's a really great starting point. Like when someone gets ready for a wedding, oh, I got to lose weight in 6 months for this wedding. Well, why do you have to lose weight? To look good. Well, why do you have to, quote unquote, why don't you already look good? Who says you don't look good? And then I imagine, like based on my understanding, our gender identity, our racial identity, our religious upbringing, there's so many things that can intersect with why we believe the things we believe, and so, what is the impact that you have noticed in clients? And you can share specific examples or not, because I know that's very confidential. So, how would you? I'll put it this way: how would you define the impact you've seen in clients when you've done this work with them of dismantling those?
Increased critical thinking. That's really ultimately like all I'm going for. Like if it's a thing where people can also then start to, like heal themselves, but if you have one session with me and like you walk away with just a little more, I call it like, almost like divine suspicion, right? Like what? Okay. So who was telling me this? What do they gain from me aligning with whatever it is they're telling me? Right? Is there another way to look at this? Like, is this actually of service to like my desires, needs, wants? And another thing that I would say that like really two things, right? That come up in all of my sessions is regulation practices, like emotional regulation practices, because we are a deeply dysregulated society, right? And we are rarely are we not in fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, rarely. And so I would say even before the critical thinking happens, I'm teaching people how to regulate themselves. I'm teaching people how to, identify when they're dysregulated, right? And that is actually like a big bite because, again, we're chronically dysregulated. So a lot of us are just like, oh no, but this is how it's supposed to be all the time, right? So even if I can help someone get to, and I think this is the thing that I said in the guide, but like, even if I can help someone just, feel what it is to be, in your rest and digest state for like 3 seconds, right? And then maybe it's 8 seconds, and then maybe it's 10 seconds. And then we go on just so you can feel like, oh, it's that thing where it's like you're super anemic and then you don't realize how tired you were until you get the iron, So it's that kind of thing. So I would say that I'm actually probably most grateful and proud of my ability to help people figure out unique ways to bring themselves back to like calm, right? And baseline, if even just for a minute, and then be able to do it for themselves on their own. And I think the more that we can do that, the more it lays the foundation for us to build those critical thinking skills.
That makes so much sense to me. Not that you need my approval at all, but it's like that just makes sense to me, that critical thinking is what comes out of your sessions with in terms of this topic, because instead of just accepting things as a given, like, oh, it's just the way it is. I remember when I was a kid, the first time I learned as a very small kid that you have to pay to have a baby. Like, you have to, when you give birth, you have to pay a hospital. Like, why do you have to pay to have a baby? Why can't you just have a, I'm like, that doesn't make
Right.
any sense. And now I'm
Right.
like, I understand why we got to pay a hospital. You got to, using the space, the doctors, but it's pretty sad. It costs that much to give birth to new life. So it's like it's having that childlike wonder. You call it divine suspicion. I love that phrase, because I think as children, we ask like, why? We always ask why, and we shouldn't lose that wondering, that suspicion. Yeah, I love the way you talk about this. And do you find that in a little bit of spicy question,
Yeah.
in psychic intuitive practitioner world, how do you see? I'll put it this way. I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and I would love your input. I find that in this realm of what we do in this industry, there are a lot of people, certain skin color, who benefit from certain practices. And there's appropriation, but also I do think that it's a very white female dominated industry. And it seems like if you are a white witch, that's interpreted, received very differently than if you are a Latina or a black witch. And there seems to be a lot of stigma when it comes to people of color doing these practices versus when a white person does it, it seems quote unquote more pure because of this the stereotypes,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
that's my opinion. And is that something that has come up in your work if you've had clients who are also intuitive practitioners?
Um, Probably. I mean, I would say in the past couple of years, that has not been an issue because I have really set up some, what's the word? Wait, actually, oh, okay. I've set up some, I don't know, lattices or something, like some nets, so that, those types of people are no longer attracted to me. So when I do work with people with more like European ancestry, there are people that actually like are connected with their ancestors. Because what I have noticed about, and I call them the pastel high ponies. Um,
Wait, that's a beautiful descriptor.
I'm a Western, boo boo. Come on. I'm not paying back these student loans for nothing. Okay. So, yeah, no, yeah, the pastel high ponies. What I love about the pastel high ponies, and I'm not talking about like the like druid Celtic ones that are just like, yeah, no, my people were at Stonehenge. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, do what you're doing. Go ahead. Right. I'm talking about the ones that are just like, oh, and, you walk in, like they first of all, every time they do a little video, they do that like strange, like vaguely sexual breath. You know what I'm talking about? That thing where it's just like, before they start talking, they look at the camera and it's this, that,
Stop.
you know, and they
Continue.
okay, and then it's always like, this like walkthrough. It's like an MTV, my, spiritual crib. And you're always just like, I know your parents paying for this house. And it's just like every fucking like just, ethnic religious practice just exploded. It's like 17 crystals and like sage and Palo Santo. And there's like not one drop of indigenous blood anywhere in the house. And then it's like a Tibetan singing bowl. And then there's like a giant gong, and it's just like, girl, your people are Dutch. What are you doing? Like, what is this? Like, why? So I find that really challenging. And what I have said before, I was like, yeah, don't even come to me no more because I don't have the patience for you. What I would always say to those people is, go to where your ancestors are. Like, you have ancestors that are sitting there, like, when you get past all the fucking like blood and soil bullshit, like, you got to go under that, right? They're bereft because they're just like, but I have like, I have tools for you, and I have things for you, and I have answers for you, and I have sanctuary for you. What are you chanting in Sanskrit for? Like, what is that? Like, why are you? Don't do that. Come here, cover yourself in moss, right? And like, let's have a communion. What do you? That's not for you. But I feel like, again, going back to internal and external systems of oppression, whiteness, camera, whiteness, not people, whiteness, because, no, right? To buy into whiteness is to, I believe, trade those European ethnic cultural competencies and practices for acceptance into this weird, homogenous, spiritually bereft community, right? And because of that bereftness, and combined with colonization, like, then of course you have pastel high ponies like, oh, but yoga, and oh, here is, I'm I'm a hoodoo practitioner. Your name is Molly. You ain't practicing nobody's hoodoo. That's closed. Put that shit down. Actually,
not Molly the hoodoo queen. No.
And I used to get like rar about it. And now I'm just like, okay, go ahead, because they'll deal with you. Right. So I at this point, I just try to avoid them. Right. Because I just feel like ultimately it serves no one but the practitioner. And I want to be really specific about, like, pastel high ponies can come in any shade of melanin, right? It's about
absolutely
what are your, like, where are you aligning yourself? And ultimately, is your work based in empowering other people or having power over other people?
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that, because that is not, I probably should have said this before I asked you the question. Like, this is not an easy thing to talk about. And yeah, I've known people who, and I think myself included, who've had very profound spiritual experiences that are somehow tied to another culture. And I think something that I have a problem with is, okay, if you're going to practice that thing, fine, but at least acknowledge where the source is and where it's coming from. It's like, if you're going to use white sage, buy from a Native American outpost or store. Like, pay that community back for what they have gifted, especially if it's something that's rare. Like white sage is becoming more of a rarity now. And I think that absolutely what you said, is it about empowering other people or just serving yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if I don't see a lot of this in my algorithm, I think because I've also have the intention of, like, I don't need to see that. I used to see a lot of, like, there is this new psychic, lavender blonde, very, very white skin. And I just think about, there are so many hardworking psychics of color that they're just received differently. And but I don't have to tell you that. And that's something that so many of us are familiar with. But yeah, thanks for indulging me and talking about that with me, because it's something that in my local community here in Long Island City in Queens, 2 years ago, a new metaphysical healing crystal shop opened, and I saw that a Puerto Rican woman of color opened it. And I told her, I hope you don't mind me saying, and now we're very good friends, hope you don't mind me saying on this first day I've met you, but I'm so happy to see you are women of color owning this business and running it, because most in New York City, most of these kinds of shops and healing centers are not. And it's not to say that people of a certain color shouldn't own these shops or run them, but there needs to be more representation. And there's so much work to do there with the external systems of oppression. Yes. But now I'm just on a soapbox now.
I need for you to tell me about that crystal shop, because I definitely am like, no, I don't want anything from anyone that isn't deeply melanated, right? Or if they're more lightly melanated, it's like, you kind of have to prove yourself to me, right? Because of obvious reasons, and for me, a really fast, easy litmus test when I encounter people who, are closer to the complexion of protection is, like, how do you respond to things like that? Like, how do you respond to me just like very blatantly, because I love shaking the table. Like I really like saying things to be that kind of, but yeah, but I have a lot of Mars placements. So, and I find that the response to just like saying the thing out loud, because we know, right, from all of the reading and all the information that is readily available, that one of the tenets of white supremacy is like, they don't like open conflict. Like they don't like you coming up and just being like, hey, bye, right. So depending on what the response to that tiny little, that to me is like a very like soft kind of lob, like, right, then I'm going to build with you from there, or I'm walking away from you because I know you're a dangerous person, not in a good way. So,
At my 9 to 5 job, we've done anti-white supremacy culture, like training on anti-white supremacy culture. And yeah, when it comes to like survival of the fittest or the strongest wins and you just got to work hard and you'll make it, like these are we go back into that divine suspicion. Well, is that really the case? If everyone works hard, they'll make it. Is that really the case? Yeah. And I really want to see more of that mindset, that anti-supremacy mindset being applied to the psychic world and being talked about more. And yeah, and I appreciate you for being one of those people that is making that conversation happen. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
I'm gonna be doing it until they let me go back to my alien family. So
I wonder what the aliens think of us. I mean,
I think that they think we're really,
we got work.
Yeah, I think that they're just like, oh,
these poor little things. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to run that ship over there that's floating next to that big sun.
Just like really, like okay, so that one. He's a performer. He's a content creator. Vinny. Like I'm gonna say, so he. Okay, so he. I learned about him. I want to say it was early in the panty where he did a little like skit type thing where it was like the Earth is interviewed to, for a space in the intergalactic delegation, right? And he himself is like, the person who is like interviewing them. And it's hysterical because he's just like asking them all the questions. Like he's like, oh, we hear you have something called a dodo. We'd love to see that. And it's like, oh, it's extinct? Okay. And then it just continues to go on about all these things. And there's this one moment where it's like, a bathroom. We don't have those here, And I feel like it's that where they're just like, really? They're still shitting? Like, ooh, like, no, let's give them 10,000 more years. And like, we'll swing back around. And if they're there still, if they haven't just charred themselves, then we'll see, and that's how I'm just going to go all the way crazy. That's how I know they think about us, because I have had conversations with, extraterrestrial beings and like meditation.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't think that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, you don't.
I mean, I was one time in a meditation with my mediumship circle. We do circle, but we've also done like, just like one-off meditation circles. I don't know what to call them. And I feel crazy saying it too, but yeah, there was an extraterrestrial in my room, in my mind's eye, and I felt it, and I felt different, and they were saying hi. So
they were saying, "How you doing? Y'all on Earth?" Oh, girl, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. So yes, how did we even get into that? I took us there.
But how do we get? We're going back to our alien family one day.
That's right.
We'll talk. We'll have a conference with them.
Yeah. Speaking of power, I mean, ultimately, yeah, I think it just feels and has always felt like this is not the sort of like spiritual kind of psychic part is new, but I have always been very much like, that doesn't seem right. Like, why are we doing that? So like to sometimes, my own seeming detriment in the moment, but ultimately, for my own good. Because I've been liberated from relationships that didn't serve me. And, my higher self and my muertos have definitely yanked my like human ego self, from the jaws of like misapplied loyalty many times, right? Like, that's not for you, stop it, so now at this point, before I used to be like, man, I'm like, why? And now I'm just like, okay, like, here we go, we're here now, so I just I mean, we're here doing it, and there is a great privilege, I think, in um, being aligned with like your assignment. And I think a lot of us don't get that opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. On my end. I've been feeling like just like starting to unfollow people or just like not associate with people who I feel like the more popular this industry has gone on social media, the more I hear the message of this is the right way to do psychic work. This is the right way to connect to spirit. I'm like, this is why I escaped religion to not hear those things. And here
Yep.
we are bringing back that type of system of oppression into the psychic world, telling people this is
Right.
how you do a spell. This is how you pray to spirit. Let's just do it the way we wanted to. And then whatever works for somebody and resonates with them and is ethical, it
Yeah.
works.
You know what? I struggle with that though, because, and here's why, but only in, so there was this book that I had gotten a long time ago, and it was written by like this like white man, whatever, and it was all of these spells and things. And it was like, you must do it this way or it will not work. And I was like, okay, and so I sometimes wrestle where I'm like, you know what, there are some like things like if you mix the wrong thing, you'll like make mustard gas versus, so I feel like that continues to be like a real tenuous like ginger subject for me, where it's just like where can I improvise, right? And so for that is a lot of just like, hey, am I allowed to do this? So because as someone who like had a mentor who turned out to be like a massive criminal, I sort of like went it alone, for a minute. And but I do think there is something to be said for like elders, right? Because again, I do have again like another piece of privilege of coming from like a lot of medicine people, right? And it kind of skipped the past couple of generations and it sort of popped back up in me. But like I'm, like that is very lucky. So then, they're like, don't do that. Nope. Right? Like not that, this instead, because you're gonna blow up the house. So it's so I feel particularly kind of protected in that way. So I'm a little like, I think it kind of is situational, right? Like there's some people that I just do the way I want. And I'm like, don't do that. Right. And there are other people that are like, well, I just felt, I'm like, okay, so I feel like I don't know, because of the rise and the popularity of a lot of it, I think you got a lot of people out here that have not done the legwork, right? And because of the trauma and our like lack of opportunities and space to be able to process the grief of all the trauma that we have experienced for however long, right? People are kind of rushing into things. And I think we're going to see a lot of people get very fucked up, by irresponsible spiritual practices. And I think a lot of people have already been led down primrose paths into heartbreak, by not only your high pastel ponies, but, just like, you've got your babalawos and things out here. And it's all of a sudden, it's just like, oh no, like they molested all the, so I think this is what I always say, like any other profession, right? There's going to be bums, right? And there are going to be scam artists and charlatans and people who malpractice. And so discernment with anything, with anyone that you are going to be trusting with your personal and sensitive and intimate information, be it like your physical body, be it your metaphysical body, you gotta kind of be on your P's and Q's because people are out here just willing to take your money and leave you in the dirt.
Absolutely. And this is where
so let's kick it up. Right?
yeah, this is where my brain explodes because I also agree with what you're saying. I said before, everyone just do their own thing, whatever resonates with them. And I also believe there are things you should not do. Like, when these paranormal ghost shows, and it's TV, but they go in and they start cursing at a ghost to make it do something. Like, you should not do that.
I just made cortisol just.
Oh, it's horrific that people. It's like you go into someone's home, like, hey, mofo, talk to me.
Hey.
Like, you don't go to someone's home and do that. So yes, it's like it's like, this is where like the dichotomies are like,
Yes,
yes anding. It's like there is no right way, wrong way, but there is a way.
right.
Maybe it's more
There's
about like the love sourced way and the fear sourced way. Go ahead.
wait,
Yeah.
hold on. No, you're onto something.
Well, because with fear, like
No
spiritual
wrong.
bypassing. Oh,
Wait.
go ahead.
There's no wrong right way. There's no wrong right way, but there's some right wrong ways. Does
I
that make
think
sense?
so.
There's
Yeah.
no wrong right way. Yeah, I think that's what it is. There's
I love
no
how we're
wrong.
hashing this out in real time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I think
Sorry.
also it's like spiritual bypassing is a good example. I mean, when I got into mediumship, I felt it was kind of a surprise for me, although now looking back into my childhood, maybe not so much a surprise, but it came as a surprise a couple years ago. And then I went into it, but I didn't realize that I had some inner child healing work to do. And that totally changed my mediumship for the better. And I think what you said before, that people are going to be pretty effed up if they don't do the work. It's like if you go into this work to escape yourself or to escape something, you're doing it for a self-serving purpose, not really to benefit other people. It's like the balancing scale is just like, eh. So yeah, I feel like we can talk for ages about the right way, the wrong
No, I
way, and
know.
oof, it's so hard being human and figuring things out. I do want to switch the topic before we hop
Okay.
off to have two more questions for you. How did Look Into My Eyes
Oh,
come about for you?
I actually love this story. Okay, so it was 2021, I want to say, and I was just like in my crib, because being in New York for those first panty years, that was brutal, and I wasn't able to do in person sessions, da 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 da, but I was managing to like kind of like crib together a life, and somebody booked a session, you know, had the session went well. And then at the end of it, the person says, "Hey, so I'm actually scouting for a documentary." And I had a couple of other people like over the years be like, "Hey, we want to do a show," and nothing ever really came of it, either because I wasn't sort of into the angle or just didn't go, right? And so, I was very kind of blasé about it. I think also because, my mentals were not, it was a shitty time, right? So I was like, yeah, fine. And then did not think about it. And then a couple of months later, I get this email from, his name is escaping me right now, Kyle Martin, there it is, the producer. And he, and at first I was like, who's this? And he's like, we talked to the blonde, and I put it all together. And I was like, oh, this is real. And then they just it just kept being real. Like it just kept being, and now you're going to come and we're going to shoot you doing sessions. And, oh, and then now come and do more sessions. And then, oh, we're going to follow you around. And so it's interesting because all of that coincided with me sort of luxury vagabonding, because I had given up my apartment and I knew that I was on my way out of the country, but I kind of wasn't, I was sort of like tying up loose ends. So they followed me around like all these different pet sits and things like that.
That's right. Didn't you have a storage unit?
Sure did.
Yes, I remember that documentary. Sorry
Yes,
to
sure
interrupt you,
did.
but yes, I remember that. Yes.
Yes. That was all. Yep. And I was like, these are all of the things. And it was like, it's books and crystals and movies, right? And like my massage table, like I was just like, I'm gonna be back for you, babies. Like it was that. So yeah, it was, and I flew back a bunch of times, to just do things, and things just sort of magically coincided. So it really was, they just scouted me. And I say this all the time, like, hey, for the good free Yelp page, because that's how they found me. So yeah, it was just, I don't know. To this, I'm convinced that like my guardian angels were like, like really illuminating, like this one, her. So here I am. That's how they got me. Just a session over the phone.
I love it. You just never know when something knocks on your door. Never know. And I when I watched the documentary, I really did love it. Not just saying that because I'm talking to you, but I was a huge fan of it. I am a huge fan of it. And I love the portions that you were in, how they edited, like your interviews, your sessions, because you talk about systems of oppression. And the person I'm talking to you right now is the same person I saw on screen. It's that real, raw, and I feel like the whole documentary, it felt like it was a very raw look at personalities, the work itself, the clients, and yeah, I'm just so happy to be talking to you after
I'm so
seeing
happy
you
talking to
in
you.
that, and to be able to have met you. And yeah, it's something that little plug. Everyone go see the movie, however way you can see it. It's not streaming anywhere, I think.
No, it is that. Well, huh? Okay, here we go. I'm gonna do the
Tell
thing. So
us. Do your thing.
I'm told that it is currently on Apple TV, Google Play, and Amazon Prime.
It is
Now,
on Apple TV. Yep.
I'm gonna whisper something. I'm not in support of putting more money in billionaires' pockets. But, so if you wanted to wait till it was free, you could do that. Okay. So I'm going to just leave it there. And then also A24 and HBO Max, whatever they are.
That's
now.
Right. They partner.
Yeah. So if you want to drop $20 on it, you can. But to be honest, I would prefer that you take that $20 and donate to a mutual aid organization or to a family in Gaza or, book a session with one of us. Just I don't know.
Support the hard workers. You know what? I like that.
But if you got it like that, listeners, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to do both, then do both.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. One last question for you. What is one misconception about your work that you want to be like, let's talk about it now?
This thing where, it's demonic, right? And I don't, do those things and da 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 da. But it's like, but you throw salt over your shoulder if you spill it, right? Things like that. I think that. You know what? Fuck all that. This is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the one that science catches up to us, right? That's the one.
Yes.
Right?
Okay, keep
That's
going.
The one. Yeah. Where it's like, we say all these things and people are like, that's tomfoolery and you're blah, blah, blah. And then like 30 years later, science is like, yes, we've actually discovered that neurons, connect with each other, even if the neurons have chatted one time and then they go away, they still have imprints of each other. And it's like, yes, like how we've been telling you that we are, these like balls of energy and these like universes of electrical current that are just like barely contained. Yeah. And like when you connect with another fucking, universe of electrical fucking neurons and things that are barely contained, like you have an effect on each other. Like that's physics, right? So it's that, and so whenever something like that comes out and there's a new study or whatever, I'm always just like, we told you, shut up. Like I'm like almost vindictive about it. I'm just like, to all the haters. And then every time, there's like the CIA declassifies something, where they're just like, yes, we know that we have like alien carcasses in a bunker somewhere, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, no, like you just that, right? Where I get impatient because I'm just like, I want like, please, cognitive flexibility. Like, where is this brittle? Like, why do you feel like this is as good as it gets, right? Or like, why do you feel like this is all that we can't? There's no way. Like, as stunning and amazing as Earth is, there's no way that it's just Earth, right? Like there are equally stunning and amazing things, you know what I mean? That we, people, not us, can't even necessarily fathom, right? And I just want us to be able to break away from these like, these fucking mythical norms that they keep trying to shove us into, so we can just begin to imagine what they're trying to tell us is unimaginable.
First, two things. Number one, the I can't evens that are bouncing off of your expression. I'm so vibing. Like I can't even believe I vibe with you so much right now because I am so. What you just said, I was snapping my fingers as you were starting to talk because this is a podcast. People can't see me unless it's on YouTube. Plug. But I have my godfather who happens to be. It's an interesting story. My godfather, not Catholic. He's a gay man, and my dad fought like verbally fought with the priest, like, you're gonna make him my son's godfather. And the priest's like, okay, and he's my godfather. I love him. He's a big part of why I do what I do. One of many big reasons. And I remember he would tell me as a kid, he said, science is going to prove the existence of God. Like, okay. And the older I've gotten, people don't like to hear it, but I do believe, whether you call it God, whatever you want to call it, something beyond,
Yes,
aliens, anything that is beyond the paranormal that we call, quote, paranormal. I believe science will bring us closer to that. I totally agree with you. And the reason I started this podcast is, one, because of my own experience. Like, oh my God, I'm a medium. If I can discover this at 29, I bet other people can too. Let's talk about it. And number two, ghost stories are universal. Every culture has stories about the beyond. There has to be, if there's a common experience across the planet, Yetis, Bigfoot, whatever it is, there has to be a common thread of truth. That's my firm belief. And so, yeah, I'm vibing so hard of everything you just said. And let's wait for the world to awaken.
I mean, I don't know about waiting. I'm just sort of like,
yes.
Nudge. I don't know. I just feel like if we just shake ass hard enough, they'll be like, what's all that ass shaking over there? That looks fun. Let's also go shake ass.
Yep. I'm here for the twerking and ass shaking and waking people up. Now tell listeners how they can find out more about you and have a session with you.
1000%. I would love to do that. So the easiest way to catch me is my website, which is ilkapinheiro.com. That is ILKAPINHEIRO.com. And that's where you can find it all. You can get me to hang out with your pets. You can get me to help you, clean up your screenplay. You can get me to help you talk to your dead great-great-grandmama. So come on through, see what's up. We get into it over there, and it's jokes. It's jokes and it's tears and it's hugs and it's I think we're just walking each other home. So
awesome. And Ilka's website will be linked in the description of the podcast episodes. Just click on her name and reach out to her. And Ilka, I so appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the energy you put into talking about the big things we talked about in this podcast, the big important things. And thanks for the work you do. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been such a pleasure. I'm so glad we're in this together.
Me too. Thank you, Ilka.
Darling, bye.
If you have a question or topic you want me to cover on Third Eyesight, head to my website, juanfranciscospirit.com/contact, and send a message my way. If you really enjoyed this episode, leave a review wherever you listen. I'd really appreciate it.